welcome back to the stage Red Hat's Diane Mueller, who will be moderating the Community Leadership panel.
To date, OpenShift Commons has been very virtual. I mentioned that in a welcome speech early this morning. We've been doing virtual briefings and SIGs, and back in the early days when I first came on board at Red Hat, I was doing community meetups and such like that, but that was more about corralling code contributions, and I talked about that a little bit. So, and the meeting times that we do for these virtual things are very North American centric, right? So there's a lot we can improve. In the fall, we're in fall, but post KubeCon, we'll be launching some regional user groups, which will help to get some localized engagement. And we're going to start in the Nordics because for some reason the Nordic folks really want to have user groups. So you'll be seeing that roll out sometime soon, and we'll also be hosting more gatherings like this one and to coincide with the upcoming KubeCons in Berlin and Austin and at Red Hat Summit. So we're going to do more of the same, right? Stuff that you've seen before. So what I wanted to hear from the SIG group leaders was they each come from different aspects of the OpenShift community. We have OpenStack, Big Data, .NET, and .gov showing. And is Chris Kretler here? No, he didn't. Okay, well, we're going to have an EDU person, but hey, that's all right. Everybody's around somewhere. But we may be starting a few minutes early, so I think that might have thrown him off. If he comes, we'll put him on the stage. But each market niche, each technology niche has different ways of interacting with different communities. So I wanted to get a sense from each of them to get them to introduce themselves and describe their roles in their organizations that they're coming from and how it relates to the SIG topic that they're trying to move forward. So I'm going to start with Judd here and Mr. OpenStack.
No. Hi, my name is Judd Malton. I'm a principal engineer at Dell, and I'm on our OpenStack team. Dell has, for the past 3-4 years, been focusing on writing reference architectures for OpenStack on our gear to help you scale up really massively in a way that's been validated through all our gear, from the networking to the storage. Our reference architecture can, if you want, include Ceph or Midakura. And finally, over the past year or two, we've been focusing on workloads, and I'm the OpenShift guy. For the past year and a half, I've been deploying OpenShift 2 and OpenShift 3 pretty much on a weekly basis. As long as my stamp or my hardware configuration is up and running OpenStack, I've been deploying OpenShift on it. I've committed upstream to the OpenShift on OpenStack heat templates and Ansible projects. And I don't get out in front of customers enough. They don't let me out of the pen often enough. So leading the SIG is really important to understand more what my customers are actually looking for to be able to smooth and integrate OpenStack.
So next up, we have Erin, who's from the Big Data world, and we will hand her that microphone.
Is it on?
It's on.
So I'm Erin Boyd. I'm a principal engineer for Red Hat and started within the big data emerging tech. We've kind of settled down into more of a storage role within OpenShift, and our goal is to provide a good user experience with storage, and that doesn't mean UI. Typically when you say user experience, people immediately think that you're talking about a user interface, but the purpose of what we do is to actually take storage, which Red Hat offers, Ceph, Gluster, container native storage, and make that work well within OpenShift. Matter of fact, seamless, and also to provide the ability to debug and use the examples, support, and really look at what users are wanting to do, evaluate their use cases, and make sure that we can easily support those within OpenShift.
Hi, I'm Prashant. I'm principal for Click to Cloud. We started working with OpenShift almost like 3.5 years ago. With OpenShift 2.0, we were the first one to support .NET on OpenShift. And from gear cartridge to coming to the container world, we have seen all the changes. Currently, we are helping companies containerizing their app on OpenShift using .NET. We are also supporting some of the backward compatibility with previous images using Mono. And Boris is here from Microsoft, so we are helping some of the team in Microsoft to bring SQL on on the Linux side. So they're trying with Ubuntu, CentOS, and as well as the Rail software. So our company has created a way where you can pull the image for SQL Server and actually deploy it on OpenShift with few clicks.
So we have .NET covered, big data, OpenStack. Now we get to the .gov, people who are using OpenShift.
Hello there. Can everyone hear me all right? I'm a bit of a soft talker, so I want to make sure that we're good. Okay. My name is Todd Wilson, and I'm with the government of British Columbia, just a little bit up the road and across the wall. We are the soon-to-be wall. We are in the midst of trying to reinvent how we engage with both the tech sector and the developer community and government developers to come up with new collaboration models to make Gov better, make the tech sector better, and really make BC just a more awesome place to be than it already is. So the OpenShift part of that story is one of the things that we ran into was the playing field for us to work with all of these different developers and all the different tech sector industries was very uneven. The data center that we use for government is behind, you know, all kinds of other fortress walls that are in the way. Developers work off their laptops and are using all the cutting edge tools that we can only dream of in government. And again, the tech sector have a lot of proprietary things on their side that they're not that willing to share or that willing to give away for free. OpenShift for us filled that kind of even playground that was a zero barrier way to get people to be able to collaborate in a work environment where we could start focusing on the business need and less on the server wrangling and tech plumbing.
Chris has joined us from the .edu section.
Hi, I'm Chris Kretler from the University of Michigan. I forgot my badge, but you'll have to take my word for it. I'm representing the EDU SIG, which, as far as I know, here today is just me. So if there's anyone else there, please come up and introduce yourself. I'd like to meet you. I'm the de facto project manager for an implementation project of OpenShift at the University of Michigan. And what we're trying to solve there is that we're central IT. We're focused on large monolithic applications, typically operating in Gartner's Mode 1 form of bimodal IT. But what we're trying to do is help researchers who have grant money and they have to develop rapidly changing applications to meet the needs of data analytics across medical, automotive, engineering. And what we see in OpenShift is the ability to provide a platform to those users that is secure, but is also able to meet their needs for rapid change.
Thank you for joining us. And I'll put up the microphone. So the use cases from both .edu and .gov are pretty convincing from most of our parts. But how the other EDUs who aren't here in the room, and I know some of that had to do with budget and getting people to fly to come to things like this, but what sort of way should we be looking at trying to engage other folks in EDU to come into this community? What's missing and what else can we do better?
Well, I think some of the key business cases are data analytics. So whenever you need to have rapid change, think about the EDU model. So I started off in commercial world, and there a lot of the decision making is top down. So you have a CEO or CIO who's able to make technical decisions. But in EDU, you have researchers who have grants. They're the people who make all the decisions in a university. So you need to be able to support their needs. They're doing research, and so we need to be able to provide a secure platform. I think it needs to be cost effective. It needs to work. Kelsey was talking about what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And I don't think lift and shift is a good idea there, but what people are expecting out of OpenShift is a platform that they can deploy their applications on, that they can count on. And I think we need to be able to administer it in a common way, but also meet the needs of those people who are trying to push out applications rapidly.
Cool. Thanks. So from a .gov perspective, I know, because I'm from BC, I'm on the other side of that wall too, so I've gotten to work with the .gov folks. You're doing a lot of work with creating a developer exchange and doing outreach to the community, trying to pull people in. And how is that working for you, and how can we use that sort of model as well?
Sure. Yeah, we created a construct that allowed us to sort of take off our government hat and reach out in sort of a very ungov kind of way to meet developers and tech sector entrepreneurs and vendors on sort of a more, well, even playing field. So we have a couple of constructs that we invented to sort of allow that to happen in as natural a way as possible. One of them we call Discovery Days, where we sort of set up a panel of tech leaders who have at least some kind of common problem statement. There's an issue that they're trying to solve. We invite everyone from students to community developers to other vendors and entrepreneurs into the room to listen to the problem statements, and then we kind of just let them talk amongst themselves about what potential solutions could be there. We don't try to force a solution out of the room. We have stickies and we have things lying around in case people want to quickly jot some ideas out. But what we find happens is that's step one into getting the barriers down and getting that communication started across some of these lines that are very difficult normally to bring together. And so the next one that we do, and this is on our own team, we do a collaboration effort that we call a design sprint. So this is where we invite people into our space, and again, we start with a problem statement with a bit of context around it of what we're trying to accomplish, and that accomplishment is what we can do in a 2-week sprint. So we really tighten the scope down on what do you think we could do in 2 weeks to solve this problem, or at least to get moving on this problem. And we throw stickies on the tables and just let people go, and there's a bit of pizza, and if we're lucky, some beer. And what we find that we get out of that too is sometimes there's really good ideas that come. Sometimes the ideas are things we sort of already thought of and not, okay, yeah, we thought of that, but we can't for XYZ reason. But just that sort of community leverage that we get and those relationships that are forged are really the valuable part that keep giving back. So these are the people that comment on our GitHub issues. These are the people that are really excited about the tweets that we put out and retweet them. And so these are the things that really start to get that momentum going.
So that actually speaks to crossing ecosystem boundaries, different user communities, different technology sectors, and it's a wonderful thing. I love to brag about it in BC. But when we talk about crossing open source community boundaries, I know there's Microsoft.net, and I can't believe how wonderful it is to be saying that OpenShift is supporting that. But Prashant, from your perspective, what can we do better in terms of outreach to the .NET community, to getting them to come in? What are the hot topics for them and the conduits that we can use or we should be using to reach the .NET community?
Well, the biggest announcement of Microsoft loves Linux was the best thing to happen, because we had a very hard time convincing customer that Linux is supported, and we are supporting .NET on OpenShift 2.0, and everybody will come. Where is the motherly ship? So now I feel at least loved in that process where like Microsoft loves Linux and we get the byproduct love out of it. Now, coming to the Microsoft users, the interesting part are they're very lazy. They get scared as soon as you say Unix or Linux or any real product. And when you start talking about build config, pod, scaling, or environment variable, they're like, ooh. So basically what we try to do there is we try to simplify that whole process by integrating the whole workflow of creating containerized app using the Visual Studio. All the .NET developers traditionally want to see that create open existing project, create a new project. I should hit the F5 button, all the logs should appear, and it should go to the destination. That's all they care. And we picked up that basic constraint that they look for and converted that whole technology model. Same thing that you guys did in the JBoss Studio, Eclipse-based whole editor part. We picked up the same idea. That's kind of like very useful. Now, another constraint about all the people, like, of course, this whole announcement with .NET Core is great, but everybody has to move to the Nugget packages and upgrade their source code and all those things. So it's kind of like a blocking factor for them. And the question for most of the enterprise, the two interesting enterprises are already here, like Edu and the government, and we come across telecom, banking, and insurance. We come across energy sector, and we also come across basically, did I cover like all the 6 or 7? So normally entertainment and media. The interesting part about these companies are these are in business either for centuries or for decades. That means they have tons of workload running both on Microsoft as well as on Linux. And their ask is like, how do I make sure that I'm able to run this in a proper manner and my IT and ops is able to deal with this problem? So we see a lot of traction coming from that. We also see like great efforts from Microsoft, like .NET Foundation that is coming up. At least there's a community-based culture that is coming up a little bit more. But I think it will take its own course of action. We are trying to bridge the gap in that whole love equation.
So probably doing some more work with the .NET Foundation and bringing them into the Commons community would be very helpful. And also some briefings on Nugget and lots of more content out there, I think, to get rid of the fear factor.
And the whole SIG community is helping a lot from the education perspective to the end customers. I mean, the previous videos that we talked about how to get the .NET application, and we saw some interesting customers, like very Fortune 100 to Fortune 500 customer reaching out after watching those videos.
Yeah.
So the whole initiative about the community is actually working out in a way, because that's where the consumers are able to see that. So it's an encouragement for a company like us and other companies who want to be part of the SIG is put more of the content out there. Because you would be surprised that your phone starts ringing suddenly and customer is calling looking for help, which everyone wants. I mean, customer want to come to you and you want to help your customer. And I found that venue as a very interesting venue.
Yeah, perfect. So I know Big Data SIG has got lots of Red Hat people working in it. And Will Benton gave a wonderful speech. But it's still very early days for Spark on OpenShift, and I think T-Systems is doing some stuff in Germany around Apache Spark because they have customers. But where are you seeing the biggest uptake, and where should we be doing more education?
Well, in big data, when we started off, we were really kind of two teams. We were analytics and we were storage, and I represent storage. Matt Farrelly, who's sitting back there, he's more the analytics side of it. And with big data, the two go hand in hand, because you can't run analytics on nothingness. So, I see it growing. I mean, as you mentioned within the EDU, I mean, that is really the crux, is that, we can store as much data as we want, but if we want to answer the questions that are being asked, we really need the analytics to enable that. So, I mean, I only see that growing, and I think storage is a wonderful support model for that, because we're able to, within Red Hat itself, have the storage tools necessary to be able to go out to these brownfield and, systems and connect to them through OpenShift, through, different plugins that we offer. So we have that flexibility, and then with the analytics and Spark on top of that, it's a perfect pairing.
Perfect. So I know we have lots of reference architectures that have come out over the past couple of days, from GCE to VMware, and at Dell you wrote one reference architecture. So a lot of the work that Judd has been doing and the community has been doing to get the documentation done. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to have those reference documents and get that content going?
Sure, they're kind of our traditional enterprises usually consider them the gold that everybody's really looking for. Fortunately, just about all the work we've been done is on GitHub. The customers are kicking the tires, asking me, how do I do a POC? How do I even get started? So I've spent a lot of time very meticulously documenting everything that lays on top of our OpenStack infrastructure. And in our very initial sort of SIG meeting over lunch today, there were two major questions that came up, which is integration points. OpenStack is huge. It has all these different products. What can I expect OpenShift to integrate with, and what should I tell my customers that you won't have a seamless experience between the virtual machine and OpenShift? So that needs to be articulated a little more, where it's integrating, how it's integrating with, not just with OpenStack, but with any infrastructure as a service. And on the other side of that is deployment. And it was mentioned earlier today that there's 5 ways at least to deploy OpenShift right now, and it gets very confusing for customers. And so I was very happy to find out that reducing and Red Hat is reducing and taking some of the work that I've done and this open source team and wrapping it up in Ansible. So there's really one way to get started with OpenShift on OpenStack and really on top of any platform as a service. Clarifying the message, because What I hear from most of the OpenStack folks is, great, it's a PaaS, and I have all these wonderful abstraction layers from OpenStack. Why would I worry about persistent volume claims? Why would I worry about implementing this or implementing that in OpenShift when I've already done all the work in OpenStack? So that's a lot of the question and a push-pull that's probably happening more in the Kubernetes on OpenStack SIG than would be happening on sort of the pure deployment. What kind of gear am I going to need? What kind of networking am I going to need? How am I going to get a solution set up for my users? That would be more the OpenShift on OpenStack SIG.
So the other thing is there are tons of other open source projects out there that we've all been listening to and hearing about. CoreOS was here. We should have asked them more about etcd operators and stuff. What are, from your perspectives, some of the other open source projects that upstream that we should be looking at for your different areas? Is there anyone who'd like to take that?
I can speak for the .gov folks. We've been following really closely. The federal government in the United States has a group called 18F, and they are a federal innovation hub, and they are very active on GitHub. So if you go to their org, 18F, and look at some of the stuff they're doing, it's very innovative. They have lots of toolkits. If you're trying to instantiate any kind of agile or DevOps transformation, some of their documentation that they have on GitHub is very valuable for making those cases, or if you're putting a slide deck together that you need to present to a customer, that's all solid gold that's there. So we mine their GitHub org.
That's okay. Forking and copying, that's all good stuff in GitHub. Chris, was there something?
So I know one of the big standards in higher education now is data emission from learning management and learning operability tools. And so there's two standards in play there, Caliper and XAPI. And a lot of the applications that our researchers are writing want to consume data that's emitted by those type of standards. And so this probably falls more under the realm of image builders, but being able to easily stand up applications that emit those type of data streams, being able to leverage some type of an application that will queue and potentially store that data, like NoSQL or MongoDB or something like that. And then being able to write applications that adhere to the regulatory standards that want to consume that data, like FERPA in the United States, for example. Those are all, I think, key things for making inroads in .edu in terms of things that are rapidly evolving projects right now.
From an OpenStack perspective, what's on? You've just come back from Barcelona.
I wish.
You didn't get to go to Barcelona? Oh,
no.
Dang! I thought
The merger with EMC has thrown everything into a tizzy, but the core members of our team were in Barcelona.
Okay. So what's on the event horizon from an OpenStack perspective that we should be looking at?
Well, what I'm hearing everybody I talk to about OpenShift and OpenStack is we need Keystone or identity management integration first thing. Cinder integration works just fine. Kind of leave it the way it is. It'll be okay as long as the identity management and the authorization allows users to mount Cinder. So OpenStack is this enormous open source project. It's kind of hard to say, yeah, integrate more with OpenStack. Especially, you know, what actually wasn't mentioned today on our SIG roundtable was database as a service. There's several companies that are putting a lot of effort into creating an open source abstraction layer for databases, SQL databases, non-SQL databases, and being able to clue in apps that are deployed on OpenShift, like you can find your database resources here, whether it's Cassandra in the back end or Mongo in the back end or any one of the RDBMSs. Like this is where you go find it, and you're integrated with Keystone Identity or LDAP Identity. You should be able to get there and get the resources you need.
So there was also a table today on identity management. So we do know that that's one of the big hot topics for OpenShift. So I think that's something we'll be doing more of in the future and making sure that there's more content around that. So that brings from a storage point of view, we have Ceph in the room. I think there's some people from Gloucester. What is the next thing that we should be watching for and trying to work into creating images and things for? pass on the mic.
That's okay.
That's okay. Stinking, just dreaming
It's
about
dreamy,
storage.
right? Storage? Oh, no, don't do that. Actually, security is one of the big topics with storage and how we provide the identity management, down to the actual physical asset. If you're dynamically provisioning data and it's block storage, it's pretty easy within OpenShift. But when we talk about shared storage or any sort of legacy storage, we have the means to do that within OpenShift, but we don't necessarily do it as eloquently as we could. So I think the integration and cross-collaboration with teams like identity management with storage, will really be an asset to make it work well and make it nice and make it secure. So I think that's one of our top priorities.
Okay. Prashant, from your perspective at .NET, there's always...
Well, I can think a lot of things right now, but I'll try to be as much politically correct here.
No, don't worry about that.
So basically, you will see a lot of cross workloads running between Azure, OpenShift, those kind of scenarios as it's becoming more and more popular, like people running using cloud and then another as PaaS. So security is a bigger thing. LDAP and Active Directory integration could come to me immediately when I see the users that are going to use the cross-platform, cross-enablement kind of scenario. There are other features like source to image, which has a very powerful way of deploying your workload on a cross-platform technology where you can literally do the lift and shift kind of a scenario. Those kind of integration project, if there is a pointers in that area. That would be an interesting way to look at it. I think Microsoft has already done quite a bit of open sourcing work in the recent past, so which is helping community a lot to build on top of whatever they are providing. For example, mono images. Looking to Windows Server 2016, the whole Docker integration and containerization, we'll see that what comes out as a guideline coming further in next year. So that is something to look forward to. SQL on Linux. So far, what are the other integration on SSIS, SSRS package? Of course, it goes across the board, not only from the data, but security, also from the basically the logs and the whole capability to manage those tools. Most of them will be coming from Microsoft, but I think there are areas which can be treated as an open source project for the cross collaboration.
So we heard earlier today from Clayton the new functionality that's in OpenShift 3.3 and what's coming in Kubernetes. So rather than outside of the box, what is it that you're looking for from Kubernetes? Maybe some of the features and functions that you'd like to see enhanced. And I know there's a lot of work going on around the service catalog and the service broker API and things along that line of that nature that you're looking for from not just from the community but from the engineers who are in the room and the product managers. Is there something on your wish list? You're nodding there.
I have a wish list.
He has a wish list. There are product managers in the house.
Yeah, one of the things that we're finding, and sort of there was a slide that resonated really early on this morning where sort of there's the different layers of operations. So there's that infrastructure operations, cluster operations, platform operations, application operations, and then the application devs, and all of those concerns along there. What we find is that there's a bit of a visibility gap or a management gap, I'm not sure how to best put it, in that sort of application ops and cluster ops layer that is kind of difficult for us to penetrate and get clarity in that space. We're dealing with a data center that's very mature in their processes. They have the infrastructure baked. They know how to handle that. What we're kind of struggling with is that middle layer between app and infrastructure. How do we manage that appropriately? How do we visualize it properly? How do we monitor it properly? Who gets the notifications and when? And how do we do sort of those basic man-handling processes? So we don't have easy answers, I think, right now.
So in OpenShift, we have a very developer-centric console,
Yes.
which makes this very nice and baked in. So if I hear you right, it's looking for an ops-ish console
Yes.
of something of
Yeah.
that nature. Is everyone listening to that? Because that was on my wish list too, so
Yeah.
cool, perfect. From an EDU perspective?
Yeah, I guess I have a business requirement rather than a technical requirement, and that's given the amount of expertise that's required to do OpenShift well. I think the OpenShift dedicated offering is very appealing for a lot of .edus. That came up in a presentation that I did 2 months ago, and I think a couple of EDUs echoed that. If OpenShift Dedicated is going to be an easy-to-use offering for the .edus, then having easy answers to the federal regulation questions is going to be an important thing. So FERPA is just bottom line standard on a .edu. You know, if you're dealing with someone's presence in a class and their identity, then it's FERPA data, and you can't write an application unless it's the platform is FERPA
certified.
FERPA certified. But our engineering department is doing DoD and ITAR work. Our medical school has HIPAA information, and so if we're going to be offering a platform to them, it needs to be able to meet those requirements.
Good to know. So from a Kubernetes point of view, from the work you're doing at Dell or on storage, is there something in the Kubernetes world that's missing that you would like, or in the next release? Because I'm trying to prep you for what you should go forward this next week, over the next couple of days, while we have Kubernetes here, and kind of hear, you know, what is the thing that, what is the session that you can't miss at KubeCon coming up? Because, you know, if you don't get this in the next release. There's a lot of heavy sighs going. So that you're just going to hope that everything gets in. I'm loving that. Are there any questions for these guys in the audience? I know I'm asking all the questions.
So Diane, one thing I would like to add to that, not from the technical standpoint, but kind of like the thinking that's coming for Microsoft announcement, the whole Docker partnership with 2016, right? Which kind of like puts the community into a divided mode. And it's coming to me and few other guys from different cloud users. One question comes to me like, oh, did Microsoft is going to acquire Docker, or is it part of their plan, or like what's going on? Or what goes on with the whole OCI initiatives, whether it's going to be Microsoft-based technology going forward, the container thing that has taken up, and it becomes a big thing for the companies like us, first to educate them, and then take the fear out of their mind that, okay, which way it's going to swing the thing. So that's one thing that is coming, apart from the technology, from the general sentiment perspective. Most of the people are asking, is Docker going to continue to be an open container model, or whether it's going to be continued to support? So the current message is kind of like confusing even further.
Yeah, I think some of the earlier panels and talks talked about the brittle what is the foundation, where is the brittleness coming from, and more education about OCI and the standards and stuff, and more support from different areas, and the .NET Foundation and others standing up. I think there'll be a couple of OCI talks this week, and we'll definitely hear more about that emerging standard. So are there any questions from the audience for these guys about their different sectors for OpenStack? Are there any volunteers to head up new SIGs? Was there a SIG topic that was missing from our SIGs that someone wanted that we didn't have yet? Because I know we have one for image builders, which has been helping people understand source to image, our whole posts of registries and containers. So if you're looking for the backlog of all of that, that's on our YouTube channel at OpenShift. So there's been a number of briefings on that. We've got some stuff on ops that have been going on. We've done lots of stuff with the EDU folks. We're going to start stepping up with some .gov stuff. And we're trying to really to work very closely with the CNCF, and you'll see a number of OpenShifters presenting at CNCF meetups coming up, and there's one on the 16th that the BC Gov guys are going to go and talk about how to make government agile. So if you want to stick around and come to Canada after the election in Victoria on the 16th, I'll give you an excuse. There's a lot of really interesting work that's going on in the Commons and in the SIGs, so I really encourage you to join a SIG, to get on the mailing lists, and if there is a topic that we didn't touch on in the lunchroom or in other places, just let me know, and I will cat herd you into volunteering to be one of the leaders for that. So I'm going to take, unless someone has a final statement? One more final.
I get so many questions about OpenShift's relation to OpenStack that I'm starting a FAQ. I'm starting a frequently asked question. I'm going to get Diane to host it somewhere because I keep getting questions that I'm answering over and over again from like, what is a PaaS? Is it really a PaaS? Am I locked in to all the way down to how do I mount volumes, and am I integrated with identity, and what about DNS and all this stuff? As sort of, I guess now the SIG leader, I'm trying to collect as many questions as I can and get them answered or answer them myself and get them in one place where we can access them.
Well, the good news is that commons.openshift.org is built in GitHub.
Right.
So
right.
I can give you a
Cool.
folder and a place to
Awesome.
put that up and get that pulled out. And so that's one of the things, if you have content or you have things, or if you want to join OpenShift Commons, all of it's done out in the open. And I'm very happy to have people write content and get that into OpenShift.commons or on the blog or in a briefing. So if there's something you're missing, let us know, and we will definitely bring it up and bring it to the forefront. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much and bring on our next speaker if he's in the room.